Hi, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And today's guest, Linda Devlieg Killman, is a commissioner. She was appointed by the governor to the Real Estate Commission in New Mexico in 2021. And I thought it would be really cool to have her on the program today to help buyers and sellers of real estate of all kinds kind of know how to be walking through the current minefield with the DOJ lawsuit, the Department of Justice lawsuit, and just to hear from someone who is in a place of authority on, hey, if you're a buyer, here's some things to watch out for. If you're a seller, here's some things to watch out for. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this and maybe understand the lawsuit a little bit better. Thanks. So, Linda, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. So can you give us just a real quick overview of the lawsuit? I know that's a ridiculous thing to say because you could probably talk about it for 2 hours, but just an overview for the layperson.
So a settlement agreement was reached, if you ever want to read it, it's 110 pages, between a private seller in Missouri who went to his neighbor who was an attorney and complained that he didn't know that he was going to have to pay the buyer's broker in a recent real estate transaction. So it turned into a class action lawsuit. And that's where we are now. So the settlement agreement stipulates that as of August 17th, 2024, these new directives came about. Change of practice is what it's called in the settlement agreement, where we have to procure a buyer-broker agreement before we cross the threshold in any home with a buyer, and that we no longer have the compensation that's being shared in the multiple listing system. So it's always a guess. And it's interesting to me because the multiple listing system was created, decades ago. Some say 50, some say longer, in some kind of format, for the purpose, the sole purpose of sharing compensation. It never had pictures. It was sometimes handwritten in a book, but it was an official document that guaranteed that the cooperating broker would be paid what was being offered. It was called unconditional compensation. And that went away. And so now the MLS, in my view, is an advertising venue and a collection of properties that are for sale. So now they still go out to the public websites, but they'll no longer internally show what the compensation is to the buyer's broker.
Okay.
Happy days.
Happy days. And we can go off on so many tangents, and I'm not going to. I'm promising you guys that I'm going to keep this so that you walk away and know something, right? So I'm a buyer. What do I need to know?
So the best practice, and I always talk in generalities of best practices, that instead of taking a phone call and jumping and running and opening the door to somebody's house that you've never seen before with a buyer you've never met before, now the process, which I do think is a good process, is you engage that buyer as a customer, much like lawyers have letters of engagement before they'll talk to you. They'll have you come in the office and talk to you for 30 minutes. And I think that's a good idea to do with a home buyer because you want them to understand the complexities of the purchase, the consequences of the purchase, the financing, all the legalities about it. And at that point, you sign an agreement that stipulates what you expect to get paid as a practitioner, because we are not going to work for free. Don't have to. You can if you'd like. And that how that payment is going to happen, different scenarios. So it's more of a disclosure and a contract between you and the buyer. So you sit down, whether it takes 10 minutes, 30 minutes, a Zoom call, whatever it is, get that document signed before you cross that threshold. That document can be for one house, for one day, for 10 houses in a week. It can be for 6 months, a year, whatever you want it to be. And that's how you start working with somebody.
Okay, so that's if you're a buyer's broker, a realtor. If you are a buyer, and you call a realtor and they just say, yeah, I'll go open the house for you, and they don't give you that, is that a red flag?
I would say it's a red flag, because don't you want to work with professionals that are working ethically and in a business-like manner? So I guess you could find somebody who doesn't want to do that. I wouldn't recommend it.
I wouldn't either. I'm being devil's advocate here.
Yeah, it might be like getting a crown put on in the back seat of a car because the dentist happened to pull over. I mean, I don't know. It's a funny analogy, but
and I'm picturing an actual crown.
That crown. Yeah, I took mine off for the session.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Coming down to our level, talking in what we can understand. Okay, so now I'm a seller. And what do I need to know about finding a great realtor? How do I know that I found one?
Well, it's somebody you can easily talk to that makes you feel comfortable. Just like with any professional that you hire, whether they're going to be fixing your plumbing, putting on a roof, an attorney for whatever reason, a CPA, somebody you can talk to that talks your language. I do have a pet peeve about realtors who talk in realtor speak, and I'm guilty of it all the time. But you have to speak to somebody that speaks your language and makes you feel comfortable, because it's a huge, huge purchase. Even if it's a $50,000 house, that's a lot of money, and that's a big commitment. And so you want to trust them. You want to make sure that they're understanding of the industry. And I don't necessarily say they have to be in business a long time, because I've met brand new realtors who have those qualities, and licensees, even if they're not realtors. So just get somebody you feel comfortable with, that they have a good understanding of the market, that you feel like that they're going to do a good job for you. And I think that's the best you can do.
Okay. And in light of the lawsuit, how is that affecting sellers?
Well, you have a lot of choices as a seller, because you can agree to pay somebody before you even get an offer. As far as the buyer broker goes, I think you can just save that idea until you get the offer, which is kind of interesting. And you agree to pay your listing broker as a seller whatever you come to an agreement on, which has always been there. But the interesting part is that you can agree to pay that buyer's broker whatever you decide. And it can become part of the negotiations, just like fixing the roof and who pays for the title fees.
Well, it always kind of has been negotiable.
Always negotiable. My gosh, that was one of the first things I ever learned 30 plus years ago in real estate school, is it's always negotiable. But I tell people, if you argue with me too long, it'll go up. And so, but it is negotiable. Of course, it has to be. Yeah.
Right. And I love it. I love your business ethic and the way you run your business. I've always admired you, just so you know.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. So how is this impacting the realtors right now? I mean, this just happened. How are realtors impacted right now?
The biggest uncertainty I see is what form to use, because they literally gave the real estate community weeks to prepare forms. And it sounds like an easy thing, except you've got lawyers involved, you've got staff involved that have to create the forms after the lawyer has told them what to put in. And then, I was on the forms committee for 8 years. And so the process for that, you see how it's done. You sit around the table, you make decisions, the attorney says yes or no, they take it back and forth. And sometimes one form can take 1.5 years to perfect it. And then they launch it into the community of real estate people. And all of a sudden something doesn't work because you haven't quite plugged in everything. And that has to get changed. So this process had to take literally weeks instead of months. And so I think that was a huge strain. And now we're experiencing those. What form do I use for that? And don't use this form for that. And what if I do this? I've already experienced it. And so I think the uncertainty in the real estate community with forms, or even understanding what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do, or whether something's a good idea, best practices. The commercial real estate world has done this for a long time.
Right.
They've never published fees in their multiple listing system. They don't really have an MLS. They have a big website. And they don't even publish closed sales prices. So they've lived in this world a long time. But they're even starting to do different things because of it. So it's disruptive. And my expectation is in November, when the judge affirms or doesn't affirm the settlement agreement, everything could change again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very fluid right now.
It's very fluid, yeah.
And so to your point, we are filming this on September 11th of 2024, and it will be released within a week, because this is right now kind of stuff. So we're going to get this at the front of the front of the line.
Okay.
So if you're watching this in several months and you've heard Linda or I say something that's not accurate now, a couple months from now, that's because it changed, because this woman is the authority. And so talk to me a little bit about that. How did that happen where you got appointed to the Real Estate Commission?
That's a really good question, because none of us asked for this. It's a governor appointed position. You don't lobby for it. You don't go around saying, how can I do this? In fact, when I first got the call, true story, I hung up on him. and I said, oh, sure. Right. And I said, I'll talk to you later. And I hung up. And there was something in the back of my mind that thought, who would pull that? And so I tracked the number and I went, oh, hello. And so I called back. And
That's awesome.
She kind of laughed a little bit. I said, it's so inappropriate. She goes, it's okay. And that happened. It's kind of funny. So this usually happens upon the inauguration of a new governor. So this was in about January, and of Governor Lujan Grisham's first term. So I went through a process. You have to do a thorough background check, FBI, blah, blah, blah. And that took a few months. And then the pandemic hit. And so that put a pause on a lot of things, not just, the measly little assignment of commissioners. But I continued to stay in touch. And I get a random call, once in a while. And then in November of 21 is when they called me one day and said, you've been appointed. So that's how. Yeah.
Wow. So you never saw it coming. You don't know who whispered in somebody's ear.
No.
It's just, here, you're the...
No, and I had worked on the governor's campaign a few times. So she and I had knowledge of each other, but not on any level that I thought she would listen to anything I said as authority on anything. But she knew I had been in real estate. She knew I had worked at a law firm before real estate. So I don't know what the reason was. Honestly, I don't.
Wow. Okay. So what is your job?
Okay. So right now I'm the president of the New Mexico Real Estate Commission. There's a commission of 5 members, 4 practitioners in real estate, and 1 public member. That's by statute. And every year we run a little election amongst ourselves, and we appoint each other for different positions. My first position was as secretary, so I held that position first. Then I was vice president, and now president. The president is considered the chair of the board. It's considered like a board. And so the chair gets to get in contact, plan things, approve the agenda, different things like that. So you have a little more contact with the background of what's going on in the commission.
The coolest thing that you've said this whole time, you just said, and you didn't even know you said it, the president gets to.
Yeah.
Like, you really love this.
Yeah.
It's
do.
not like, I have to do this or this is my job. You love this.
Yeah, we don't get paid. That's the other thing to know.
Yeah.
We get paid a per diem. So every meeting, I think I get paid $45. It's quite exciting. Yeah. Some serious coin there. But that's by statute that you have to get paid a per diem. But yeah, so I do. Because you get into the depths of real estate that you never thought about. And most people don't understand there's rules, there's statutes that guide everything that real estate people do. Not everybody's a realtor. So if you're a licensee, you adhere to these two things, rules and statutes. So there's about 12,000 real estate licensees in the state of New Mexico at any one time. And I think half of those are realtors. Yeah. So there's a lot of people.
It's a lot. That's a whole lot. Okay, so the commission's job is
to protect the public. We are there to protect the public's interest in real estate transactions.
And how do you do that?
So let's say you're a home buyer, home seller, property seller, and you feel you've been wronged in a real estate transaction. You would call the real estate commission, the executive secretary probably, and then they would assign you to an investigator. You get contacted by the investigator. And by the way, I've done this because I've been a public complaining about a property manager, my own. And so I had good experience on both sides of it. So you're contacted by the investigator and they will go through everything. They contact all the parties. They compile a file. They ask questions of all the witnesses, review all the paperwork. And then after that's done, and sometimes that can take 6 months, then they bring it to us in a public meeting. And we have meetings every other month. And then in executive session, they bring us the cases, which we've had 2 or 3 days to read. Sometimes there's 15 of them. Sometimes there's 35. Just depends on the caseload. So we read them individually on our own. And then in private session, where it's only us and the investigators and the executive secretary, get to review it. And then as a board, just like you do with anything else, we have a vote on whether there should be sanctions, whether we dismiss it, which we call closed. And then that's how it's done. The thing to know is that these are always anonymous. So when I'm looking at a case, I don't know who it is or where it was. So it's completely anonymous unless and until we give a sanction, and then that case number becomes some kind of a notice to this person, from a fine at the very least to perhaps referring to the Attorney General's office. And then at that point, we know who it is. But it's always anonymous and kept confidential.
That is so important.
Oh, it is.
It's such a small community.
Yeah, and I want people to know that, because sometimes they're afraid to file a complaint, or they're afraid if they've had a complaint filed against them that we all know who you are. And so I've become a very unpopular person at luncheons. Nobody ever likes to sit with me, so I just chalk it up to that. And I think, well, they must think I know that I don't know something.
Oh, that's
it's true. Yeah.
Oh, well,
we have some pretty funny stories.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's never ending. Never ending. Thank you so much to you and all the commissioners for what you're doing. Why do you do it?
I don't know. It's this sense of service, and I love our industry so much that I've always kind of gravitated towards being assigned to these things. Honestly, I've never, I've served down at the association forever, different things. I never sought that out. People always just go, hey, can you do this? And so it was just one more of those, hey, can you do this things? And I really, truly do love it, because it's such an amazing industry.
It really is.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things that the commission does, and one is protect the public, and we just talked about that. What is the other thing that they do?
The other one is to improve the professionalism of real estate licensees.
Okay, and how does the commission go about that?
Well, I think just by our mere existence and knowing that there's a body of people that are overseeing behavior in a good way, and we try to be helpful. I'm always trying to impress upon the RLD group, RLD, Regulation and Licensing Department that we serve under or with, and I think it's because we try to make ourselves available to help licensees improve their professionalism, just by having guidelines, standards, rules, and statutes. Rules and statutes can change, and we're in charge of that as well. So when we want a rules change, or if the public has brought something to our attention that they suggest there's a rules change needed, then there's a process for that, a pretty extensive process. So things are always changing, and by those rules changing and then notice of those rules, I think it helps people with professionalism and standards.
Absolutely. And so also in raising professionalism, realtors are required to take so much CE and that kind of stuff.
Continuing education classes.
What do you guys have to do with that?
Well, we oversee the educators, the education process, and the licensing process.
So this real estate commission job, the big money job that you've got, how long are you insured that huge salary?
It's a 5-year term.
Okay.
And you serve at the governor's pleasure. So, yeah, it's an appointed position. You could serve for 5. Some have served for 10 years. There's a gentleman, I think somewhere in southern New Mexico, that's served for like 20. I don't know how he did that, but you just, it's an appointed position, so you could be there for a long time.
That's
no term limits. How about that? Yeah.
Well, I think with that salary,
it's hard to drop.
Right. Thank you so much for serving realtors, serving the public, serving our economy is so impacted by
huge
by real estate.
It's huge.
Yeah,
they say the American dream, you take it lightly, but it truly, it's the wealth building involved in real estate, the opportunities to help people with that is just eye-opening, for sure.
It truly is, and my statistic might be a little old, but it's the average net worth of a renter is like $6,000, and the average net worth of a homeowner is like $455,000.
Yeah, exactly. You can't lose. I mean, when I look back on houses that I purchased, and I look and go, oh, it was $32,000. And I thought, wow, this is really expensive. And now that house, because I've tracked it, I actually went to go see it once when it was for sale, just out of curiosity. And I think it's up to like $250,000 now. And I remember when I was a newly single person and I bought my first condo on my own, and I sold it about 5 or 6 years later. And the equity that had built up in it, I could have never saved as a secretary, which is what my living was then. So all of a sudden I had, a 5-figure bank account that I'd never had before just because of the little condo.
But listen, I mean, really, 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 it's always going to be too expensive. It's always.
And don't worry about the doorknob that doesn't work. Right?
Preach it, girl. It'll all, really.
It'll all work out.
It's gonna be.
Don't get mired down in the details, because the big detail is what you want. You want to get the house. You want to get the real estate, the piece of land, the building, whatever you're buying. Don't get too mired down in whether the seller doesn't want to fix a doorknob or a hinge on a door or something, or a broken window. Because trust me, it might be the biggest mistake that you ever made. That $20 hinge is going to cost you a lot of money.
It is crazy. And something that I talk to everyone about, especially sellers, is when right now we're having a great time. We're filling out the listing paperwork. Everything is good. Everything is fun. But when we get in the heat of it, you might get a little emotional.
It might.
Maybe it might happen.
Yeah.
And they think, no, it's not going to happen. And I always ask them, please, at that point, give me the respect to bring us back to business and get us through this, because it's those little things that will kill you. And I had a friend. He was a friend, still is a friend, who was almost homeless over $50.
See,
and it's like, come on, come on. And now that I guarantee you that house has gone up probably.
Principals can cost a lot of money.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. They can.
So yeah, no, real estate's where it's at. I'm glad I've always been in it in some manner. And interesting thing, I've never told you this. Going through my mom's old records, year after year after year, boxes of stuff. She was actually, thanks, Mom. She was actually in real estate, and I didn't know it at one time. Yeah, and I never talked to her about it. She never talked to me about it. And I discovered she was actually involved in some real estate transactions in Indiana. Yeah, isn't that funny?
Good for Mom.
Yeah, she knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is where it's at. It really is. You don't want to be left behind, and do whatever you can. Get a professional. Mm-hmm. How important is it to have a professional?
Oh, well, you could try to do it on your own. Wouldn't recommend it. Wouldn't recommend giving yourself a filling either, but you could probably do it. It's just there. It's so complex that you could make a mistake without having guidance.
And so I'm just spitballing this out here to you. That your experience, what you have been through personally, and you've sold hundreds and hundreds of homes over a couple of years.
Yeah.
A long couple of years. With all that experience, how much has your experience saved your buyers or your sellers? Like monetarily.
Yeah.
Where because you knew this or that or the other, they would have never known, and they would have just walked down that blind.
Well, and it happens more with when I tell them, you've got to buy this property right now. Trust me, I'm a psychic. I know what's going to happen. And that's where it's paid off, is because I've known when to jump on something. And there's been those few times, of course, when you say this is not exactly the best property for you because of other things that you might know, about the market, the developer, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We get inside scoop on just market conditions and construction, and we're not contractors, but we kind of hear about things. And so yeah, it's knowledge. It's just knowledge like that.
And knowledge not used is not powerful. Use our knowledge. It's powerful for you as realtors. So thank you. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I can't think of anything.
Awesome. Then I'm going to consider that. We nailed it. Peace out.
Thank you.
Thank you.